All right. Welcome to the Environmental Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Grady, and our mission is to bring you interviews with industry leaders with the goal of providing you information about industry trends, climate change, future energy, circular economy, and service providers making an impact in the business. And today's guest is Ron Gonen. He's the author of this new book called The Waste-Free World, and he's also the CEO of Closed Loop Partners. Ron, thanks for joining the show.
Sean, glad to be here.
Hey, before we jump in, let's talk a little bit about, your journey, how you got to where you are today, what you're doing at Closed Loop Partners, and give people a little understanding of what that looks like and what happened there in that process.
Sure. My professional journey, interestingly, got started when I was in high school, where I grew up with a single mom and needed to get a job when I was 8th grade, 9th grade. And fortune would have it that I started working for a family where the dad was one of the first green architects in America. This was late 80s, early 90s. And that's where I really first started learning about all these concepts and ideas around efficiency and advanced product design and architecture. And it was just something I was always fascinated by and always seemed to me to be the most efficient and right way to do things. And then out of college, I went into management consulting, and although there wasn't a sustainability theme, it taught me really important lessons on software development, management, and business process. But in my mid to late 20s, I realized that what was really important to me personally was to find that intersection between sustainable business practices and maximizing returns. Went back to business school and started my first recycling company called RecycleBank.
Oh, okay.
I was a CEO there from 2003 to 2010, and that really launched my journey. And from there, I went on to become a professor at Columbia Business School, where I taught a course on social entrepreneurship. I also ended up being a founder of a solar company, and then joined the Bloomberg administration as a Deputy Sanitation Commissioner, and then in 2014 launched Closed Loop Partners.
Oh, that's amazing. So, we're going to dig into this book here, which is pretty cool. But I did read one of the interesting stories you had in there, which was, as when you were the sanitation director, you had these local residents coming out talking to you about your green recycling boxes and why you're forcing that down their throat or something like that. Talk about that, because that sounded like an interesting interaction.
Most people think of New York City as populated by progressive liberals. But there are some pockets of New York City that are actually very conservative, watch Fox News every night. And probably the best thing about New York City is actually its diversity, and that diversity crosses religions, ethnicities, race, gender, as well as political opinions. And so we were rolling out a curbside organics program in New York City, where we collect food waste that's set out in a bin outside of a home. A lot of people think of New York City as all high rises, but in fact, there's actually a lot of single family homes in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island. And Staten Island is actually known as the conservative part of New York City. And so I was out there with my team helping to deliver the first organics bins for people to put their food waste in, and then we would collect it and take it to a local compost facility.
You're like doing good. You're doing good stuff here. Launching the program.
And I'm the guy in the suit. Everyone else is in the kind of work clothes delivering carts, but I wanted to be out there and observe the team and how things are going. And so this person runs out of their home, pointing their finger at me and says, I'm tired of this Bloomberg nanny state BS. I watch Fox News, and I've learned about all of this liberal, progressive, things that you guys are trying to do, and that just costs me money, and I'm tired of it. And I sort of let him go on and on and on. And then I asked him, do you mind if I just explain the program to you and its benefits? And he sort of begrudgingly said, sure. I said, look, this is a voluntary program to start off. You have two choices. You can not participate. No one's going to bother you. But not participating means putting your food waste in the garbage. And if you do that, then we have to continue doing what we've been doing for decades, which is to take your tax dollars and your neighbor's tax dollars and use those tax dollars to ship that food waste to out-of-state landfills. And in aggregate, we spend about $400 million a year in New York City doing that. Or you can participate in this organics program and put your food waste in this bin. If you do that, we avoid using your tax dollars to send all this food waste to landfill. And instead, we take it to a local compost facility that employs your neighbors, people in Staten Island. We create compost that we then sell to local landscapers. It's your choice. You can either be somebody who's sucking tax dollars out of your neighbors to help dispose of your food waste in landfills, or you can be additive to your neighbors and neighborhood and help reduce the cost of using tax dollars to send food waste to landfill and actually generate local businesses. But it's your choice.
Wow. So you just laid out the concept of circular economy to him right there.
Yeah. And putting it in that context of, this isn't about your political views.
Right.
This is about dollars and cents and how we use our tax dollars. And I don't think I got him to change his political affiliation or his political views.
Sure.
What was important was that I got him to change his behavior, because he began to see that the behavior I was asking him to follow was actually in his financial best interest.
And it wasn't a political agenda-driven concept. This is a nonpartisan concept. I mean, so I just recently did a podcast with Pete Pearson of the WWF. And, you know, the idea of really, coming together to fight the waste war. There's no political affiliation. We're all fighting the same common causes. How do we deal with waste and managing that issue and solving those problems? And everybody can contribute to that solution. And it does, there's no political divide or anything with that in my mind. So that's a cause everyone can get behind, right?
Absolutely. In that conversation I had with him, the words climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, coal, Republican, Democrat, blue state, red state never came out of my mouth. It was all about
tax dollars,
tax dollars, dollars and cents.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. No, I love that part. So, okay. Now we will follow back up on Closed Loop Partners, because I want you to explain to listeners what your company does. But before we do, the main thrust of today's conversation is going to be about your new book. You've got a great new book that you've just released, and I'm going to show it for the listeners here. A waste-free world, and it's available on Amazon and all the big stores and everything. So it's out there. I read, I would say honestly, half the book. I couldn't get through it all because I had so much going on, but what I got was very good. And the introduction was spot on. I mean, you really made a really good, convincing argument here at the beginning, but talk a little bit about what led you to write this book.
I had written a number of op-eds and had given a number of talks about how our economy is currently structured, and that how people think our economy is structured and why it was structured that way is actually wrong. There's a hoax that's been perpetuated that makes us believe that we're the stalwarts of capitalism and we live in a free market system and it's survival of the fittest and a meritocracy. And in fact, our economy has been structured and effectively gamed for the financial benefit of certain industries who didn't actually need to compete to be successful. Mm-hmm. They were given massive amounts of government subsidies and massive advantages. So their products would be less expensive. They would get contracts. And so I was writing op-eds about this. I was talking about this in different panels and seminars. And then the sort of humorous part of the story that led to the book was Alec Baldwin, the actor, has a podcast called Here's the Thing. And I got invited to be on the podcast to talk about waste and recycling. And I talked about the concepts around how our economy is structured. And a successful book agent was listening to the podcast and called me up afterwards and said, you got to turn this into a book. Right, and that's the story of how this became a book.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And congrats on putting the book together. And Did you pretty much write this during, the COVID pandemic period, or was there a little bit before the COVID pandemic
Uh,
period? Sorry.
Great question. About 20% of it was written before COVID hit.
Okay.
And that you would think that COVID would have made it easier in the sense that I was sort of sequestered in my apartment and could just write. But actually, COVID made it a little bit more challenging. But it was a great experience to take all of these ideas that I have and experiences investing in and backing entrepreneurs and partnering with CEOs of large corporates and be able to tell those stories to the public to hopefully give them additional perspective on opportunities to live a more sustainable life.
That's great. I love seeing that. I love hearing that story. So in your introduction, you laid out a really convincing aspect for the book, and then explain what you meant by "We've been scammed by a coalition of waste profiteers who are benefiting from the take-make-waste economic system."
Sure. So the way our economy's been structured since World War II, early 1950s, is a take-make-waste system where in order to manufacture a product, you extract a natural resource, oil for plastic, ore for metal, timber for wood or paper products. The products are designed to use those commodities one time and then have the customer dispose of the product. Could be in a landfill, could be unfortunately someplace in nature. And then you start that process all over again for the next product. That's not the most efficient way or the most cost-effective way to manufacture. Every time we're using a product, we're paying for the extraction of a natural resource, and then we're paying for its disposal in a landfill. If we were to focus on recycling, if we were to focus on advanced product design that uses less materials in the manufacturing of products, we would significantly reduce costs of manufacturing and the cost of products for consumers and the cost of disposal for us as taxpayers. But the system's been gamed to ensure that linear system because the extractive industries, the oil and gas industry, the mining industry gained way too much power in Washington, and the landfill industry gained way too much power.
No, exactly. So how do you think the linear make waste system got a foothold in our society? I mean, like if you look back, say 50 years ago or so, I mean, it seemed like the products were made a little better, a little, more solid. I mean, you would fix things if they broke. Now it's like, it's broke, we just dispose of them. I mean, how did this get a foothold in society where it's so prevalent now?
Yeah. So prior to World War II, we used to get two types of marketing messages as consumers and citizens. As consumers, we would be marketed that quality was the highest form of status that you could achieve. You wanted to buy products that were well made, that would last a long time. And as citizens, we got messaging from our government that recycling was patriotic duty. A lot of natural resources that went into manufacturing of products were derived from politically unstable parts of the world that weren't our friends. So in our own national interest, we were told, let's make sure we're reusing and recycling everything. Post World War II, there were these massive industries that had been developed during World War II and during World War I for the war effort. And they were important to the war effort. They helped us win the war.
Yeah.
But these massive industries, the extraction of oil, the extraction of metal, rather than winding themselves down or becoming focused on quality, they unfortunately shifted to a mode of, hey, if we just hawk this marketing message where quantity is more important than quality, we can continue this business that we've had going on through the war. And that's the story behind it. And Dwight Eisenhower, who was the president at the time, actually warned us against this. He gave a very famous speech about the military-industrial complex gaining too much control in our society, and that's effectively what happened.
So a lot of industry just continue to keep that engine going. I mean, right? I mean, and just transition into other products to make, from the, like, say, automotives, instead of producing airplanes and tanks, let's produce more cars.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing about it is they didn't say, well, this is what we want to do. We're all capitalists. We're all focused on the free market. Let's just go to work and compete. Well, that's not what they did. And this is where the hoax comes in. This is where the scam comes in, is they effectively infiltrated Washington, D.C. to make sure that they started getting all types of tax subsidies and tax credits and all different types of advantages from federal governments and state governments, which effectively made their products cheaper than the more sustainable alternatives. And then the marketing messaging that we taxpayers and consumers were getting from the government, as well as from these companies, was that, hey, if these more sustainable products were cheaper, people would be using them. But this is free market. This is capitalism. Our make, take, waste products are cheaper. And in reality, they weren't cheaper. The only reason they were cheaper is because our tax dollars are being used to subsidize them.
Oh, wow. Well, in your view, what effect did the measurement of the gross domestic product play as a key, as a key performance metric in the economic health of, in the whole make, waste mentality for consumers? I mean, how did that get really embedded into the way we think?
Along with infiltrating Washington, D.C. and state capitals in order to get all different types of tax credits and subsidies to keep their products cheap, they also look to develop economic models and systems that would create the impression that what they were doing was good for the overall economy. And in order to do that, they went looking for some type of economic model, and they found GDP.
And KPI was like, let's use this to measure against the health of the economy.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that GDP has been around for hundreds of years, or it started with the birth of the economy. It's a relatively new economic concept. And actually, the economists that developed the GDP made clear, like, this is an important economic metric to look at, but it is not to be used as a central evaluator of the health of the economy.
Right.
But we literally threw his
opinion out the door.
Yeah, like,
we're using it anyways.
Yeah. Forget what this guy who developed the concept said on how it should and shouldn't be used. We'll use it how we want to use it. And GDP was the first perfect economic model for these industries to push onto the economy, because GDP measures how much was produced and what it was sold for. That's what it measures.
Yeah, and these industries are wanting to maintain that production, maintain the economic purchasing power, or the buying power, basically the selling power of all these products, because that shows that they're making money, regardless of the quality. So it just went down. I mean, the quality of a lot of these products were less, and it just became that perpetual problem, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, like, GDP, it does not measure, are our streets safe?
Right.
Are our public schools good? Are we getting access to good healthcare at a good price? Is the air that we're breathing in the water clean and healthy? It's not measuring any of those things. So we can literally have an economy where the government is telling us, we had a great year last year. GDP went up. Meanwhile, families are looking around going, my streets are more dangerous.
I'm suffering here.
Costs went up. My public schools stink. What economy are they talking about? And that's why you have a lot of people in the United States feeling disenfranchised, is they're hearing messaging about how great things are, while they themselves are feeling like they can barely get by. And that messaging makes them feel like a failure. And it's a complete hoax. Like, what they're feeling and what they're seeing is the actual economy.
Right.
What we're using as a metric, as a measurement or a testament to economic performance is actually completely devoid of what we, the citizen,
Value.
considered to be a successful or not successful economy. But it
Right.
works for the GDP model works for industries that want to rely on make, take, waste, because it's just measuring how much stuff are you making.
Right. Well, okay. So we've been in this make, take, waste linear economy, say for the past 75 years at least, right? I mean, give or take, right?
Yeah.
So describe what a circular economy would look like and how can it solve reducing our consumption of natural resources as well as climate change concerns at this juncture in our, I think we're at a tipping point. So what do you think?
Well, you said an important number there, the last 75 years. And I want to take a moment and touch on that because sometimes people think that this linear system that we've been operating under is how we humans have lived forever. And that 75 years number is an important one because it's not how we've always been living. We used to actually live very differently. In fact, our grandparents, our great-grandparents grew up in a completely different system. So it hasn't been that long that we've been under this linear system. And shockingly, it's created enormous damage to our environment and our health in 75 years, which is even more reason why we have to fix it. And I'll give you two examples of that. Like for your listeners, take a moment and think about when was the plastic bag introduced into society? Just take a moment and think about that date of what you think it is. So the answer is that the plastic bag was introduced in 1975. Okay. Before 1975, nobody knew what a plastic bag was. If you went back in a time machine to 1974 and said, I want a plastic bag in the supermarket, they literally would not know what you were talking about.
We have paper bags.
We have paper bags. Yeah. And actually, we had more people using reusable bags. So they came to the supermarket with their bags than we did have people using paper bags. So in 1974, people had no idea what you're talking about. But here's the thing. Plenty of people were shopping and getting their products. The economy was doing just fine before plastic bags came in. So the problem with plastic bags is that today they can't be recycled. And so they need to go to landfill and that costs money. And so the question becomes, well, who's going to pay? And we've set up a system where the company that sold the plastic bags and made all the money selling the plastic bags, they're not paying for it to go to landfill. We, the taxpayer, are. And
so they just peddled off their disposal on us.
Right. And so one of the things their circular economy promotes is always focusing on what's going to happen to this product when someone's done using it. And who's going to be responsible if there's a cost. And the linear system said, well, we're going to share that cost across the public, whether or not they participate in using that product or not. And a circular economy says everything should be continually reused, either through repair, refurbishment, or recycling. And if it's not, then the producer needs to be responsible for paying the cost.
Sure. Yeah.
Another example from a linear economy shift that happened is milk. Milk used to be consumed where someone came to your home, dropped off milk in bottles that you wanted. You consumed the milk and you gave them back the bottles and they left more bottles with milk. And the bottle was just something that you were effectively just renting. And really all you were paying for was the milk. And then we moved to a system where in order to get milk, you got to go buy milk and the package.
Right.
And that's just an additional cost. If we go back to using systems where you actually reuse packaging, it's definitely better for the environment, but it's also going to significantly reduce costs.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember as a kid, we'd get 10 cents a Coke bottle, right? Remember the Coke bottles were, that was our candy money, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, we'd go scavenge the streets and we'd find a good Coke bottle and go into the store and get us a sucker or whatever it was, and that system worked because you would go put a deposit down for your 6-pack or 8-pack of Coke, or whatever it was, the 12-pack. And then you would, take the bottles back to the grocery store. And that process was really in effect till about probably the early 80s. And then it started to shift in my mind where things started to change.
And that concept of, there's got to be value to the end of the life of a product is really key, because that's what's going to motivate people to make sure things get collected and recycled. And if there isn't the value, it just shouldn't be the responsibility of the taxpayer.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely. Well, I mean, those are good examples. So, that's so this whole concept of circular economy and not reducing, basically not creating a waste. Essentially, your book's about a waste-free world. So, I mean, we're always thinking of the products that we're making are a resource at some point in the next iteration of its existence, right?
Yeah.
And so when we talk about, the waste-free world, besides like say single-use plastics, one of the biggest contributors that I've seen, that is a big drain on natural resources that we have, as far as air, water, waste, water and energy, fuel, chemicals and things like that. That is affecting our climate change is probably our food waste component of the industry. And man, how do we solve that problem in society and create a circular economy to really address that area of our food business?
So food waste represents about 50% of what's in our garbage today.
Yeah. And you saw front lines because you were the sanitation director at the city of New York.
Right. And the interesting thing about food waste is actually a commodity. Food waste can be turned into one of two things. It can be turned into compost, which is a nutrient-rich fertilizer.
Right.
Or through anaerobic digestion, it can actually be turned into gas.
Yeah. RNG.
And the absurdity of our current system is that half of our garbage is an actual valuable commodity that we pay
to dispose of. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. And
there will be a future where all food waste is used either to generate gas through anaerobic digestion or to create compost. And in that time in the future, which I actually don't think is too far off, people will look back on how we've lived over the last 50, 75 years, throwing food waste into a hole. And they'll just scratch their head and say, I don't understand. You're saying that people used to pay to send food waste to landfill?
Right.
Can't be. We use the food waste to
create energy. And to create a byproduct like a compost product that we can use to grow vegetables and to grow food better, more efficiently with better nutrients.
So the most exciting solution that we've seen on the market is a company called Home Biogas, which, full disclosure, we're an investor in, which has developed what's called a household size anaerobic digester.
Okay.
So an appliance that goes into your backyard, put all your food waste into it, converts it into gas that pumps back into your hot water heater, into the burner in your kitchen, or into your barbecue. So today you go on a Home Biogas's website, buy one of these appliances, and if you have a barbecue, you don't need to be buying propane anymore. You just take all your food waste, put it in the Home Biogas system, and you can generate enough gas to
fire up the Weber.
Yeah, totally. And so
that sounds great.
The exciting thing is there's a lot of innovation out there that is going to help solve these issues, and we're super excited about those innovations.
Well, that's transformational, right? That's that transformation shift that we need as society to start thinking about. Like, what do we need to do to get away from the take, make, waste linear process, to get into the circular economy? How can we scale up that circular infrastructure to really address the needs of a society to really establish a functioning circular economy, right? I mean,
but there's a number of things that have to happen, from investment in innovation to building more recycling infrastructure. But I would say the single most important thing is shifting waste from a cost of the commons, which it is today. Like,
everyone's paying.
The Smith household can put out as much garbage as they want, and their neighbors are going to share in the cost of sending it to landfill. The Jones family can recycle everything, have no cost.
Yeah, and they're still paying taxes on it.
They're still paying for it, right? So converting waste from a cost of the commons to a utility is probably the most important thing we can do, so that waste is treated similarly to water and to electricity. You can generate as much waste as you want. You can throw out as much waste as you want, but your home is going to be billed directly.
Individually for your consumption or your,
Yes.
your disposal savviness, so to speak. I think that would really, incentivize people to really take the next step and say, you know what, I think I care a little more because it's coming out of my pocketbook in another way that I hadn't seen before. Now it's directly, they see the direct impact.
And it'll change their recycling behavior, but it also change their consumption behavior because they'll become much more aware of the recyclability of the products they're buying. Because they may have one product on the shelf that's not recyclable and go, oh, this buy's a little cheaper than this other product here that's made of recycled content. But then they're going to do a full cost accounting and go, oh yeah, but I got to pay to get rid of this thing at the end of its life.
So I'm going to go with this guy. It might not be the best, but it's good enough.
Yeah. So, or it might not be the cheapest on the shelf.
Right.
But actually it is the cheapest when I do full cost accounting because I can recycle it, pay nothing, as opposed to paying to have to send it to landfill.
Yeah, no, I like that approach. And I think that's something, that's pretty awesome. I think too, there's going to be a lot of, like in New York City. You guys were one of the first states that kind of started coming out with like mandatory curbside recycling of organics. Is that true? I think that was, or is it voluntary?
Still voluntary. Yeah.
Okay. But it's like some policies out there that you've got a full-fledged program, infrastructure starting to be developed around it, right? Isn't that kind of one of the big, I think, limiting factors for, the vast amount of municipalities across the country is how do we manage all the organics that we actually could collect because we don't probably have the infrastructure to manage it from a compost or an anaerobic biodigestion perspective.
The infrastructure is definitely a challenge. We need way more infrastructure, but as an investor, I look at that as a huge opportunity because
absolutely. Yeah. You're like, hey,
infrastructure. And the good thing about building infrastructure around organics is it's not like you're going to municipalities and businesses and saying, find some extra money to compost your food waste or put an anaerobic digester. They're already paying to get rid of it. They're paying for it to go to landfill. So when you provide them that solution for composting or anaerobic digestion, you're simply shifting money that they're already paying to go to landfill to a more beneficial use of their dollars, which is to have it composted or turned into energy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And where do you see education coming into play with this too? Because it seems to me like that's one of the, the secret sauces of making this really effective. And where should we focus the education component of a whole circular, mindset?
I think there's a few things we can do there, but definitely starting off with the way we started this podcast with the story about the guy in Staten Island who came out and was trying to educate me about the wonders of Fox News. Is it's really important to ensure that people understand that waste disposal is not free. Mm-hmm. It's a cost to the tune of billions of tax dollars a year that's embedded in our tax bill. There's industries that don't want that line item separately.
Yeah.
So from an educational standpoint, it's really important to get the message out to people that waste is expensive. Recycling is a way to save money. And that's really, really key from a communication standpoint. Because I think as soon as there's that realization, then you'll begin to see recycling behavior change, consumption behavior change, and policy change.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Another contributing factor in, I think, the existing make waste economy we currently still see ourselves in is this concept of fast fashion. Where do you see that playing, and how big is that issue, and what can we do to reverse that trend?
Fast fashion is a good example of the tragedy of the commons scenario that we've developed for ourselves with this linear system. So the way fashion used to be is a major focus on quality. All right, you bought a piece of clothing, it was expected to last. We've transitioned to a system where make it as cheap as possible, get it out there, wow people with the low cost. It's actually not going to last them that long. They'll throw it out. They'll come back and get another one. And that business model is effectively built with the requirement that the public accept the cost of disposing of all those clothes. Because if you went back to those fast fashion companies and said, it's free market, you can sell whatever you want, but you got to pay for the disposal, their business model wouldn't work anymore. And
yeah, no, they're going to be like, let's not make that.
And it's a growing problem. Fashion apparel used to be 1-2% of the waste stream. Now it's getting close to 10% of the waste stream.
Really?
So cost has gone up, and that cost is borne by the public taxpayer. And those companies are effectively freeloaders. The other thing is that it rewards the laggards, not the leaders. So Patagonia, for instance, builds clothes to last. Number one, focus on quality. Number two is if it gets damaged in some way, you bring it back to them, they replace it for you, they make sure it gets recycled. We should be rewarding companies like that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be the same as the laggards.
Yeah, no, I think LL Bean's a little bit in that fashion, that mode as well. I mean, you could send back a jacket if it's broken or, messed up, and they'll replace it. I mean, that's great customer service, and the quality's good. And
it's smart business. It's smart business. It's what keeps customers loyal and coming back.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So there's that trend is that, buying something fast and cheap for, use or once or twice, and then you're done with it. I mean, so that's a problem that we have. And I guess the biggest problem that's getting a lot of the news headlines is, the whole issue of single-use plastics. What can we do with that? I mean, obviously start thinking about using products that you can reuse to, containerize things. I mean, we're such a fast food society anymore, right? How do we get away from that?
I think making a lot of those items compostable, because they're part of food service, is one way. So now it can actually go into the organic stream, and that the infrastructure is getting built for. So that's one way to solve for it.
Yep.
Another way to solve for it is developing reusable models. So we have a company called Algramo that has developed a system where you have a reusable Algramo container. It has a chip embedded in it that's connected to your mobile phone. So you can take your container to any Algramo machine. They have them in Walmarts now, and buy your cleaning detergents in your Algramo container, and just pay for as little or as much as you want off of your phone. Way more convenient than going into the store and always having to buy, the size that's been determined for you. So I think the combination of things with single-use plastics is, one is anything single-use should be made from something that's compostable or recyclable. Number one. Number two is we do need to start shifting more to these
reusables
type models.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of airtime, so to speak, and marketing. Loop's doing a nice stuff with a lot of consumer product manufacturers with reusable type products, and that's pretty exciting to see what those guys are doing too. That's great. Okay, well, let's do you think people today are more concerned than ever before about the need to address climate change and the depletion of our natural resources, and how circular economy will have a major role in solving these problems? I mean, to me, it seems like society's more aware than ever.
I do think they're more aware, and I think it's a combination of a few things. I think people are being more affected at the household level by climate change. We talk about the fires that have been going on the West Coast. You can talk about some of the flooding that's been going on in the South and Southeast. So people across the political spectrum are realizing, hey, there's something going on here that's costing me.
It's not normal, right?
Right. So the impact of climate change is caught up with the messaging that Al Gore was, and the warnings that Al Gore, for instance, was giving over a decade ago. That's one thing that I think's changed attitudes. I think another thing that's changed attitude is there's a younger consumer segment that's coming up that this is really important to.
Yeah.
And then there's a third consumer segment, which is in the investment world, that's recognizing that there's a transition that's got to take place here. And if this transition is successful, it means the shifting of trillions of dollars from one type of system, this linear system, to a circular economy. And that's exciting for them.
Oh, yeah.
I think the combination of those three factors is definitely accelerating circular economy production.
Okay, well, how do you see us scaling up to solve these problems? What type of infrastructure and businesses are needed to transform into a fully functioning circular economy that we would like to see?
The sectors that we need to see investment in are, starting off, I would say, material science. So how do we develop new types of materials that we can use in products or for packaging? One example of a company in our portfolio is a company called Mori, M-O-R-I. It's a company out of MIT that's developed a odorless and tasteless silk protein that gets sprayed on fruits and vegetables that creates an oxidization barrier and reduces spoilage. So now you get rid of all this harmful plastic wrapping and packaging that this food is in while it's being transported. So that's one example of material science investment. And then we need to invest in advanced supply chains and manufacturing systems, and we need to invest in collection and recycling infrastructure. And there's a lot of capital that needs to be deployed in those three areas. And our belief is that the returns could be significant in those areas if the investments are done well.
Well, and where do you see technology playing a role in that whole, approach as well? I mean, it seems to me that, there should be a pretty significant piece there for that to play.
Absolutely. Technology has a huge role to play in this. One example is a company we have called AMP Robotics that's in our portfolio that's developed the first robotics and artificial intelligence system for the recycling industry.
Okay.
So that's an example of using technology to improve the sortation of items. Technology is a core part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, when I look across the spectrum of, municipalities, we're needing to, that generate that they want to manage the organics process effectively, but they just don't have the anaerobic digestion or their composting facilities available to really meet the demand of what's out there. And they're going to struggle to get there until that infrastructure is in place. And, where do you see the federal government or the state government playing, in this economic transformation, this circular economy transformation, and maybe help funding some of these things?
The federal government's role is going to be important. And the reason why it's going to be important is, and here's an interesting thought for your listeners, is there is no industry in the United States that's ever gotten to scale without significant government participation.
Yeah. That's
not what's marketed to us. What's marketed to us is every industry that's successful did so through pure capitalism and outworking the other guy. That's not totally accurate. It's actually been a combination of great entrepreneurship, phenomenal innovation, a lot of hard work, teamed with the government helping make sure that the United States is a leader in certain industries. So as an example, the car industry never built the roads. It was the government that built the roads.
Yeah.
The automotive industry would never have been able to scale or be profitable if it had to be responsible for building all the roads. The airlines did not build the airports, nor do they staff the airports, nor could they be a viable business if they had to build and manage airports. That was done by the government. Oil and gas industry for plastics.
Railroads too. I was going to say about those guys.
Yeah, oil and gas industry as well. Massive amounts of tax subsidies, plus our military effectively protects their shipping lanes. If we are honest with ourselves about how industries grow in the United States, that it does require government participation to grow an industry, we should expect that the Biden administration gets involved in building circular economy infrastructure. And that may be through tax credits, maybe through different financing mechanisms. There's a whole host of things that they can do to be supportive. but this is a golden time for the Biden administration to be supportive of the circular economy industry and make sure that the right amount of financing at the right cost of capital flows into the industry.
Yeah, I just saw something you guys posted up that you guys are involved with some the National Composting Association or organization that you guys are advising as part of that committee to develop the infrastructure to increase composting across America.
Yeah. It's
what's that going to be? I mean, how are you guys involved with that? What does that look like for you guys?
That's us working with other players in the organic space to help local and state and federal policymakers understand why supporting anaerobic digestion development and compost and infrastructure is really important to local job creation and managing their local municipal budget and being a more sustainable community. And so this isn't going to happen overnight. I wish it could. It'd be much better for all of us. But we're making great progress and are really excited for the future ahead in terms of both impact as well as financial returns.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about the closed loop partners a bit. We've been kind of heavily focused on the book and some of these thought pieces within the various chapters. So let's explain to us, what does closed loop partners do? How are you guys developing and identifying companies to invest in and to obtain develop a fund that is profitable for people to invest in?
Sure. So Closed Loop Partners is a investment firm and innovation center focused on building the circular economy.
I love it.
Investment firm. We have 4 asset classes: an early stage venture fund, a project finance fund, a growth equity fund, and a PE fund. And then we also own an innovation center called the Center for the Circular Economy.
Okay.
And that structure, where we have different asset classes as well as innovation center, enables us to look at bottlenecks, identify solutions, and then apply the most appropriate type of capital towards that solution to help it scale.
That's amazing. So what are some of the projects you're working on?
Well, we have projects ranging from early stage investments that we've made for a couple $100,000 to large scale infrastructure that we've built and companies we've acquired. So a year and a half ago, we acquired Balcones Resources, which is now probably the largest privately held recycling company in the southern part of the United States. We service Austin, Dallas, Little Rock, and Sarasota.
Okay.
And that company was acquired for tens of millions of dollars. And we're now scaling that company from what was really a Texas-based company to a regional powerhouse.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there's a wide range there of different companies that we're investing in, but always through the lens of, is this company solving a bottleneck in the circular supply chain? And then what's the right type of capital at this moment that'll help the entrepreneur and the company scale? And then we apply the right fund and the right source of capital to that project.
And then in some of these funds that you manage, I mean, there are, larger, entities that are investing into your fund to help, basically return, obtain a return on the investment, but also help you fund other projects to keep growing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we expect to provide very attractive returns to our investors and demonstrate that investing in a circular economy, yes, it's good for the environment, but it's also a place where you can achieve significant financial returns.
That's marrying the two of, key objectives for a lot of people, right? Just like you said earlier, I'd like to make a little money with investing my hard-earned cash, but also do it with a purpose.
Absolutely.
And it's a very specific purpose. This has been great. I love the approach that you guys have. And I'm sure you're not like the only circular focused investment company out there. There's probably a few others, but Closed Loop Partners is a great name. I mean, how'd you come up with that name? I love that.
Another funny story is the original name for the firm and the funds was the Infinitum Fund, but that was already taken. And so then I thought about what am I doing? What's the name is circular economy, but what am I doing? And what we're doing is creating closed loop systems. And that's how the name Closed Loop Partners came about.
And I'm sure you guys are all sitting around the coffee table, coming up with these ideas, and it just popped up. You're like, I like this one. This is, what do you think? And it just kind of stuck, huh?
Yeah.
No, that's great. I love seeing that and that collaboration. That's awesome. So how many employees work for you guys?
Today, we're a little bit north of 40 people.
Okay.
Mostly in New York. We have one operating partner in Israel, where we invest heavily, as well as Chicago and the West Coast.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to continuing watching your journey and how you guys are growing and all the good stuff coming out of Closed Loop Partners. Before we leave, I just wanted to get your last little comment on how far do you think we'll advance in developing a fully functioning circular economy in the next 10 to 20 years?
Oh, come very far. Next 10 to 20 years, very far, because it's in the financial best interest of so many stakeholders and entities. If you ask in the next few years, I think still got a lot of work to do. But if it's the next 10 to 20 years, I think we'll be living in a much more circular world, which will be far more beneficial to most people from both just taxpayer reduction, better air quality, and a number of other economic and environmental benefits.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think people will start to really see more of this advanced scaling of, industries and the focus of circular economy is just going to be more prevalent in the front of the mind of everybody, I think, as we continue to advance. Well, Ron, thanks for coming on to the show today. You did loved having you on. Great guest, and all the best and good luck with your book. I'm going to put this back up on the screen, Waste Free World. Guys, get your copy out there, and really appreciate your time. And thanks for coming on the show.
Sean, great to be with you today. And I hope people enjoy my book.
I'm sure they will. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.